how do they do it?
What do you mean?
The fight scenes. I mean, like, how do they do that? It's so complicated.
Oh, I can actually answer that. I just recently watched a documentary on it called Reclaiming the Blade. It's a bit more on the swords itself and the actual history behind it, but there are some interesting tidbits and information on the fight choreography in movies, especially Lord of the Rings. Until said otherwise, everything from this point on is from Reclaiming the Blade. You see, there's a lot of work that goes into sword combat and fighting. It's not just random swinging around, as that wears the swordsman out and leaves them defenseless. There are several people that work to make sure that the actors not only know what they're doing, but are mostly accurate in the combat that they are replicating. This is due to the work of people such as Bob Anderson, a sword choreographer who has worked on several recognizable films and fights, including The Princess Bride and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. He was also the man inside the Darth Vader suit in the original Star Wars trilogy and choreographed the fights in those movies as well. However, although it takes many hours to perfect these scenes, the fighting within these movies is not completely historically accurate. There have been efforts made to bring this accuracy to the screen, but right now the sword fighting that parades the screen is a much more romanticized version than the real thing. The combat that is on screen is similar to traditional combat, but it's a much more simplified form of it. Traditional sword fighting is similar to and referred to as martial arts, and it is not too far off from some of the Eastern forms of sword and martial arts. This encompasses different blocks and techniques to try and disarm, wound, and kill the opponent. For example, this move is meant to injure the other warrior by cleaving him with the cross-section of the sword. But even if it is blocked, he could still hit him with the butt of the sword if he were to make a slight adjustment and swing upwards. You won't find many moves like this in most movies. Even though the actual moveset in combat might not be completely accurate, the craftsmanship used in forging these props is given careful detail to make them accurate to what would be found in the real world. Whether it be the materials, forging process, or the little details put onto the sword itself, historians and blacksmiths try and painstakingly create these props that might not even be noticed by the general audience. Their hard work is still commendable and should be recognized. The swords in the Lord of the Rings movies are an example of this. Whereas the books might not have to go into great detail, the movies have to for visual aid. So, much more attention needs to be given to them. An area that is also given significant detail is the weight in these swords. Special attention is given to how heavy these swords feel. In actuality, the swords aren't really that heavy. Instead, they are relatively light, but still weighty enough to require attention when wielding them. But the weight of the sword, plus the movements required by the user, along with whatever armor that they are wearing, can still deplenish the swordsman's stamina fairly quickly. Despite the fact that the fights themselves aren't accurate even when the swords are, sword fighting in movies such as The Lord of the Rings has risen the general interest of sword combat in people's minds. Without this revitalization, some of the historical knowledge on the subject that is now known wouldn't have been discovered if it weren't for these people, like these two in the woods. They are the ones to thank for bringing sword fights back into a scholarly mindset, even if they might prefer the more romanticized version that is on the screen. This concludes the information that was found in the documentary Reclaiming the Blade. But yeah, that's about all I know on the information for the documentary. The documentary goes into a bit more detail on different stuff, but that's pretty much it in terms of that. It's interesting, right? It's so stupid. Oh, wow.
That's nice.